Welcome to the youth building. So glad you've joined us today. Last week was our third video that we uploaded called Man of Sorrows, the third one. And we looked at Jesus entering into the Garden of Gethsemane, where he began, as the scriptures put it, to feel sorrowful and troubled, to feel deeply grieved, unlike any other human being has ever experienced before in the history of mankind. So we're going to pick up where we left off, Matthew chapter 26. If you don't have a Bible, go get one. Pause the video. Matthew 26, verse 36. Then Jesus came with them to a place called Gethsemane, and he told the disciples, "Sit here while I go over there and pray." Taking along Peter and the two sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. He said to them, "I am deeply grieved to the point of death. Remain here and stay awake with me." Going a little farther, he fell face down and prayed, "My Father, if it is possible, let this cup pass from me. Not as I will, but as you will." Jesus very well understood the Old Testament. And when he knew that this cup was coming and being placed into his hands, he knew what was happening. The most clear verse we have is Isaiah chapter 51, verse 17, where it says, wake yourself up. Stand up, Jerusalem, you who have drunk the cup of his fury from the Lord's hand. You who have drunk the goblet to the dregs, the cup that causes people to stagger." Jesus well knew that the cup being placed in his hands was a cup of God's righteous wrath. His fury upon sin. His fury upon mankind who was sinful beyond hope. Sinful beyond rescuing. He knew that the judgment was in this cup. The judgment of God, and the weight of it was crushing him. And so he cries out, "If it is possible, Lord, let this cup pass from me." Now, Jesus wasn't lacking faith in the Garden of Gethsemane. But in his sinless humanity, he was expressing the pain of punishment. The heaviness and the weight of this cup, the cup of horror, is now in Jesus' hands, and he cries out in anguish to his Father. And what was the Father's response? Silence. The Father's response was silence. The author of our book says, "The door of his Father's house remains fast closed despite his repeated knocking." Another moment he said, "The lofty one is silent, and heaven seems barred with 1,000 bolts." Met with silence. And the silence was the answer. Because he's asking, is there any way besides me drinking this cup? And the answer is no. There is no other way than the cross, the cup of suffering. And then we get to the line, Jesus says, "But not as I will, but your will be done." And we can read that and we can think, okay, is there two different wills going on? Two different desires where the Father and the Son are disagreeing, and we almost have like a clash of the titans where we have God the Son and God the Father, and they're going at it until one will appears more dominant? That's not what we have here. This is a prayer of submission. Not as I will, but your will be done. Is God the Son always doing and wanting to do what God the Father wants? He is simply expressing the fear and anguish and the pain of the punishment. He has always wanted to do what the Father wants to do. They've always been on the same page, and they agreed from eternity past how to save his people. And Jesus willingly and voluntarily stoops himself down and comes upon this earth. And he willingly and voluntarily goes into the Garden of Gethsemane, where he knows that this cup is waiting for him. And he does that all for his sheep. And because of what Jesus does, we now have access to a different cup. We have access to the cup of salvation. Psalm 116, verses 12 and 13. How can I repay the Lord for all the good he has done for me? I will take the cup of salvation and call on the name of the Lord. And I'd just like to close this video with a quote from our author as you look at the two cups. I'll read the quote over here. These two cups, one so bitter, the other so sweet, stand side by side. The one cup necessitated the other. The one cup was empty that the other might be filled to overflowing. The first cup guaranteed the second. Both cups are precious and bear the hallmark of sovereign grace.